Good morning and welcome to the Global Perspectives and International Initiatives podcast at the University of Central Florida. My name is Karen Solla, Public Affairs Coordinator for GPII.
And I'm Diana Tristan, the Middle East and North Africa intern.
Today we embark on a journey through Spain's rich tapestry, from its Islamic heritage to the global impact of its language. Joining us is our esteemed guest, Dr. Francisco Fernandez-Rubiera, an expert in the field of Spanish linguistics and the Honorary Consul to the Kingdom of Spain in Orlando since August of 2023. Dr. Rubiera, thank you so much for joining us.
It's a true pleasure, and thank you so much for inviting me. Really honored. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. We're incredibly excited. So I want to start off the discussion by talking about your personal journey from Spain to the United States. You're originally from a town called Oviedo, correct? Oviedo?
Yes, Oviedo.
Asturias. So can you tell us about your upbringing there and how your hometown has influenced your academic and professional journey?
Yes, thank you so much for that question. I was actually brought up in an environment in which I noticed that people spoke differently. But it wasn't until I moved to Alicante, that was back in 96, to pursue my undergraduate studies, that I realized that it was not 100% equivalent to what I was hearing. I mean, I noticed that in the news, but then you don't give it much thought at the time. But then it wasn't until I came to grad school here in the United States, in Michigan State, in 2001, that I realized that little, almost none, research was done about Asturian language. And I thought, well, I mean, maybe that could be my goal, to actually put Asturias in the map, Asturian language, and what it entails, especially for the linguistics communities. I mean, that's been my goal and it still is, to a very large extent.
Wow, that's really interesting. So when did you realize, how soon did you realize that, your dialect, the impact of the Asturian language in Spain, or in Spanish rather, was different from Spanish in Alicante?
I noticed it. I remember having a coffee early morning, like 8 a.m., with some people from Valencia who also speak Valenciano, which is a dialect of Catalan. And at one point, because we have some similarities, they approached me and they asked me, do you actually speak Valenciano? I said, no, it's Asturiano, if any. Even though I was not aware, I mean, I knew there was a dialect, but then how different it was, I was not really aware, and I hadn't digged that much into it. So it was basically talking to people, realizing how different my way of speaking, conveying sounds were from the other dialects and other forms of speech in the country. But then researching about it, it wasn't until I came to the States that I thought it was even worth it. Because, I mean, unfortunately, it's considered a dialect. It's not even an official language. So there is a lot of back and forth, a lot of politics involved to actually make Asturiano like one of the official languages in the country, even though it's protected by the Constitution. But then it's the regional politics government, the ones that are not really in favor of approving that. So it's been taking a while, but we're getting there. Now we're teaching Asturiano in primary schools, high schools, and they used to have a minor, but then they had to end it at university.
And is that throughout Spain?
No, that's only in Asturias.
That's still amazing.
Yeah. Very local, very regional.
Well, thank you for sharing that insight. So moving forward, your esteemed role as the Honorary Consul to the Kingdom of Spain in Orlando is fairly recent. Can you tell us how you were how you were appointed to this role and what that process was like?
Definitely. I was actually approached by the Honorary Consul in Jacksonville, Miss Sonia San Juan. She sent me an email. She said, oh, Paco, I don't know you personally, but I saw your name in the website from UCF. I see you're from Spain, and you're tenured, so I'm assuming that you're going to be in Orlando for a while. Would you be willing to serve as the Honorary Consul of Spain in Orlando? Because we haven't had one for the past 2 years. So I thought, well, I don't know what that entails. Can we talk? So we started talking. And she told me, yeah, it's going to be a lot of work and zero pay. I said, okay, right, perfect. That sounds like something that I would do for sure. But then after that, I managed to talk to the Honorary Consul of Spain in Tampa, Jose Vivero. And between him and Sonia San Juan, the one from Jacksonville, they pretty much convinced me that it was something worth doing in the sense of helping the community and making sure that you are contributing somehow to Spain as the representative of the country here in Orlando, and also to help the consulate because they're pretty much overwhelmed with the amount of work that they have to do. So then suddenly I got a phone call from the deputy consul from the consulate general in Miami, Miss Sofia Ruiz del Arbol Moro. And she said, Paco, I've been reached out by the Honorary Consul of Spain in Jacksonville and the one in Tampa. They are very willing to actually vouch for you. So can you please send me a CV? And I want it yesterday. It's like, okay, sure. So they wanted my CV, the type of outreach activities that I carried out, how I was involved and representing Spain. But then, of course, I mean, being an associate professor of Spanish linguistics, then, I mean, that's granted, right? So, I mean, they reviewed the CV, they sent it to Spain, the different candidates, they voted for them, and then finally I became the Honorary Consul of Spain. So it got approved in Madrid, and then they sent the Carta Patente, which is what basically qualifies you or grants you the position as Honorary Consul of Spain in Orlando.
That's amazing.
Wow.
What was your family's reaction to this?
My mom was not very happy because, of course,
It kept you away.
yeah, it kept me away, and then it's gonna be like, really, don't you have enough work on your plate? Like, are you gonna be adding more stress to your life? It's like, yeah, sure, mom, but I mean, in the past, I mean, I was lucky enough also to meet the prior honorary consul, Ms. Raquel Tacon, who actually helped me a lot to renew passports for my minors when they used to live here. And whatever question I had that was pertaining to the consulates, he was always there and very reachable and approachable. So, I mean, I thought that's somebody that I have to model myself as. So I'm doing my best in the year that I've been in this position.
Oh, that's amazing.
Wow, that's really great. And is there any particular project that you guys are working on?
We have a project right now that is very interesting, and actually UCF is also partaking. So we are collaborating with the Florida Cancer Specialist Foundation, and they have a project that is called Las Meninas Project. So out of the Meninas painting, which is a painting by Velázquez, there is this artist from Venezuela. His name is Antonio Azzato. He made sculptures, and he donated 15 mini sculptures to the state of Florida. So it's the first time that the Meninas are coming to this side of the Atlantic. He donated those 15 sculptures to the Florida Cancer Specialist Foundation so that those could be painted by people undergoing chemotherapy, so that art helps and heals those people. And those are actually going to be auctioned here in Dr. Phillips in April 20th.
Oh, wow. Soon.
And two of them have been painted by UCF, by the College of Arts and Humanities, people from faculty, staff, and the students from my own class of Advanced Spanish Conversation, and from Dr. Elena Colon Mendoza. She's teaching Baroque art, so she also brought the students. So instead of painting, what they did, they wrote like words of encouragement. So our two Meninas, they are covered in bilingual, trilingual, because some of them actually wrote in Cyrillic, so I'm assuming it's either Ukrainian or Russian. And those, I mean, show the type of involvement that I'm willing to put into my role as honorary consul, which is contributing to the local community. Las Meninas, I mean, what other type of painting or sculpture is going to represent Spain more than the Meninas itself? So, I mean, having them here it's an honor, and it's been a pleasure to actually contribute with that.
Oh, my goodness. Your students must have loved that.
They loved it, but then they were so scared that they would mess up because, of course, I mean, you're handwriting on a sculpture. So make sure that you're writing italic. So make sure that in cursive and that it's clear, because those are going to be auctioned. I mean, of course, we had like two great artists. We had Estela Arbaez from the School of Visual Arts and Design, and we also had Neida Mora, who were the two artists in charge, each of them of different Menina, even though they collaborated in both of them. So one of them is called Hope, the other one is called Esperanza. So they are bilingual by nature, and they are beautiful. And actually, if you want to see them, we did a recording for the Dr. Hologram. It's going to be showing during the UCF Celebrates the Arts. In 3D, you're going to see myself, and you're going to see Neida and the two Meninas and Estela showing how beautiful both Hope and Esperanza look.
That'll be wonderful to see. Oh my goodness, I'm really excited about that. So with all of these experiences, like you just talked about the Menina, how do you come across these opportunities, and do you then decide, this would be a great thing to bring to my students versus this is a great thing for the local community? How do you determine those kinds of things?
Well, I try to reach out to everybody and whoever wants to participate. I mean, I'm more than open. I'm open for them to actually participate and contribute because, I mean, down the line, this position is honorary, which means help, assist, provide information. And if I can just bring a piece of Spain to Orlando, I mean, goal achieved. So that actually people know that there is something pertaining to my country, not only as the honorary consul, I was also as a Spaniard and a linguist that works in the language. I mean, I'm very thrilled to have the community participate in these type of events and getting to know my country itself. Yeah.
Awesome. And how do you envision contributing to cultural exchanges and fostering strong ties between Spain and the local communities in this position?
I mean, I'm willing to participate in any cultural event that pertains to Spain, languages, culture, and actually, for example, we have a grant that comes from the Ministry of Education that is called NALCAP. It's the North American Language and Culture Ambassadors Program. So they're looking for people that recently graduated so that they can go to Spain and help in the teaching of English as a second language in a high school in Spain or a language school. So, I mean, it provides a lot of opportunities so that the students that have recently graduated, they don't know what to do with their lives. Well, here's an opportunity to actually go abroad, experience what it feels like living in a different country, immerse yourself in Spanish, and then bring back, if you want, that experience, and then continue. Because, I mean, whoever becomes an ambassador, then they're going to be vouching for that program in years later, right? So that's part of the promotion and the type of activities that I love collaborating in. And also searching for potential partnerships with the local community. For example, I mean, I'm in touch with we're lucky to have 4 consulate generals in Orlando. We have Colombia, Mexico, Dominican Republic, and Brazil. I don't think I'm leaving anybody out. And I mean, it's always a pleasure to actually meet the consul generals in these consulates and just introduce myself. Like, if there is anything that I can contribute with, I mean, I'm the liaison between the consulate in Miami and the community in Orlando. I mean, I know right now, for example, that our prime minister, our president, he's in Chile today, and yesterday he was in Brazil. And in Brazil, the Spanish community is helping the build of a new metro station in Sao Paulo. So there is a lot of partnerships and collaborations between our countries. So it's always nice to reach out to those that are actually represented in the local community. And then finally, and that's the biggest part of my role, it's help people understand the Ley de Memoria Democrática. This law, which was approved or passed in the year 2022, anybody whose grandparent was of Spanish origin, if they can provide the necessary documentation, then they can also become Spanish citizens. Now, it's so technical that most people need assistance, or they don't know how to find the birth certificate, or where can I look for this information? So, I mean, I'm here to help. And with the vast amount of people that we have from Venezuela, Puerto Rico, Cuba, this is not Miami, but it's almost Miami. So, I mean, it's a phone number, an office that they can come and talk to someone instead of just seeing an email address that they can send an email. Takes 3, 4, 5 days to reply, and then, of course, they're just sitting there waiting, whereas they can just come to me and talk. So, I mean, and that's the most gratifying part of my position as honorary consul, is getting to know the local community. I love it.
That's amazing. We actually have a former GPII intern who graduated from UCF, and she emailed me a few days ago to say that she's teaching English in Spain, and she's loving it, and she loves the culture, the country, and it's actually her first time outside of the United States. So not only is it her first visit to a different country, she's living there, and she says that
and she loves the experience.
Oh, she loves it. She absolutely loves it. So I also wanted to ask that you coming from Asturias, it's a region with a rich cultural and historical background, and I wanted to ask, how does it influence your role as honorary consul? And does it influence your perspective on Spanish history and just the Spanish language in general?
It does, 100%. Especially, I mean, I was not aware of these, but we have a Centro Asturiano in Tampa, which I only recently managed to visit, and I got to meet they are called La Orden de los Caballeros. It's like they're the grandkids of those that actually founded the Centro Asturiano. So, of course, they maintain the culture, the heritage that they brought from Asturias via Cuba, because they ended up in Tampa, but prior to that, they actually went to Cuba to continue with the tobacco industry. So, I mean, they still keep the heritage. They still keep the folklore. So every year they celebrate the Dia de Asturias, which is on September 8th. And, I mean, I'm planning to actually go and visit that celebration this year because I've never been, even though I've been in UCF for the past 12 years. But I never got a chance to go to Tampa and see that celebration. I wasn't even aware that they were doing it. I knew about the Centro Asturiano, but all I knew was that they just celebrated weddings, which is, of course, I mean, it's a way to keep the building standing and pay for the bills. But then once you dig, then you get to meet the Orden de los Caballeros, and then you realize how much history they actually keep. They have a library, 2 cemeteries. It's amazing, the type of things that they have there.
Wow.
They used to have 2 hospitals. They were running until very recently, like 20 years ago, they had to close the hospital. But a lot of people, actually, I met one in Miami that told me that she was born in the Centro Asturiano in Tampa, in the hospital. So it's amazing.
That's wonderful. Oh, what a great way to have a piece of home, here in Florida for you as
That's
well.
right.
So I also wanted to shift a little bit and talk about the mark that Arabic has left in the Spanish language. Can you talk to us about that? I'm Puerto Rican, and my colleague, Dr. Mervat El-Jardi, is Lebanese, and we have often had those conversations of the similarities between Spanish and Arabic, and, we'll talk about certain words like camisa for her, and how we also say, in Puerto Rico, at least we say ojalá. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Right. So you want me to change the hat now, becoming the Spanish linguist?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
perfect. That sounds excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's surprising the amount of lexical vocabulary that we have from Arabic, but then, I mean, obviously it makes sense. I mean, if you look at the history, it's between 711 until 1492, it's more than 800 years. So obviously, I mean, that has to make an impact at some point related to the vocabulary, right? Which is surprising because, I mean, normally when you have a language that coexists for that long, one of them is going to impose over the other. But this is not the case, which for me, I mean, as a linguist, what it tells me is that the languages coexisted. There was no imposition. They just mattered to be at the same time, at the same place, and each of them contributed in one way or another. And actually, some linguists, they say that the j pronunciation that we have in Spain, we don't say reloj, we say reloj, which is very marked. They say that sound actually comes from Arabic. So it's our inheritance at the phonological level. So it's not just vocabulary, lexical items. It's also pronunciation, intonation, some people say, that is also related to the Arabic because it's very similar.
That's
so, I mean,
fascinating.
It's a lot of influence that you can find, as you said, Albornoz, for example. My girlfriend is from Armenia, and she uses the word burnuz, which, because of that word, when I said Albornoz in Spanish, she says, oh, wait, so then there has to be an Arabic root. It cannot be something coming from the Armenian language. So that's fascinating. So it's like opening Pandora's box, then you realize that your own language is also being influenced by another, that you never thought that they were actually connected somehow. So it's fascinating, yeah.
I love that. I always have fun with that whenever, when I speak with people who speak French or other Arabic speakers as well, because, Arabic also has their different dialects, and it's always really interesting to hear, how one word is pronounced in one country versus another.
That's right.
So that always fascinates me. We also wanted to discuss the enchanting period of Al-Andalus, spanning from the 8th to the 15th century, as you mentioned. Cities like Cordoba and Granada flourished with cultural synthesis, fostering tolerance among Muslims, Christians, and Jews. How do you see the lasting impact of the Islamic civilization on Spain's art, architecture, and cultural heritage today?
Oh, I'm very proud of her heritage, let me tell you. And it's undeniably a mix of the different cultures that were actually represented in that historical period. And besides those examples, which obviously, I mean, the mosque in Cordoba is amazing, the Alhambra, one thing that you have to see at least once in your lifetime. But I want to mention Toledo. Toledo, which is like an hour and 20 minutes from Madrid. They had a school of translators back in the 11th century. It's fascinating because they had that school of translators providing cultural exchange of the three main cultures that they had during that period, which were the Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews. And then it was Alfonso X, Alfonso X, in the 13th century that he actually institutionalized it. So that tells me that those cultures coexisted in the architecture, in the respect for the languages, in providing translations into the three main languages spoken by these three different communities. And they were not isolated. They were actually part of what makes us Spaniards nowadays is the combination of those three, because they coexisted and they intertwined, making us what we are. And just to give you an example also of something that I saw recently, in Jaén, they have recently found a synagogue that is called La Sinagoga del Agua in Úbeda. That's in the old part, in the Jewish quarter, which was found because somebody bought the property. They wanted to remake it, revamp it. And then when they started digging, they found that it was a palace.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my goodness.
And they have these amazing artifacts from back in the days that, of course, now they cannot build on it.
Yes.
They have to keep it as a museum because it contains so much material.
Right.
But it's open to the public, and it's amazing to actually see. Because then you realize how powerful these different communities were. Because, I mean, it's a huge area. It's so nice to see the space, especially because it was so big. Then it tells me there has to be a lot of people that were actually Jewish in this area, because otherwise this space doesn't make sense.
Right.
And it's amazing. So, I mean, you recover a lot of history through these type of things happening. Suddenly, somebody decides to buy a property, wants to revamp it, then start digging, and then suddenly, oh, look what we found.
Right.
This used to be, and then they keep digging, and then, of course, more stuff keeps coming out. So it's amazing. So, I mean, the three main cultural backgrounds that we have, they're represented everywhere. So every single city that you go to, Toledo, I mean, as I said, not far from Madrid. You go north, of course, it becomes more Christian-like, but you can still see the coexistence of the different cultures at the time.
That's really fascinating, especially, I would imagine it's quite often that people come across artifacts, whether it's from this period or even Roman or pre-Roman times.
That's right.
I can't imagine how often projects have to start and stop because of this.
That's right.
So whenever structures are found, not just artifacts, but whole structures, do you know if those structures then become like heritage sites? So people...
Yeah, they have to by law. Yeah.
Okay.
They are protected. So I guess the government there intervenes, pays whatever money so that the property can become property of the government or of the country. Because obviously, I mean, the last thing that you want is that to be demolished and then have an apartment complex. Yes. It's like, no.
Right.
I mean, yeah, the setting may be ideal for you to actually build that, but then you don't want to do it.
No. I'm really pleased that those sites are preserved. So now I want to transition over from the Andalusian period to Spain's colonial legacy. I specifically want to talk about the impact of Spain's colonization on Latin America and the Caribbean. So how does Spain view its historical legacy in these regions, considering both positive and negative aspects? And in what terms of language and shared heritage, how is this relationship evolving?
I would say, I mean, it's wonderful that we can actually speak in the same language. And that makes us have some commonalities. And also from the cultural perspective, I mean, having dinners at late at night. That's something that happens everywhere in Latin America, which I believe, I mean, it's unfortunately that we had to bring that up with ourselves, right? Because then you come to the States and it's completely different. But it's the language, it's the culture, it's even the religion. I mean, how many churches do you actually see when you go to Latin America? So, I mean, all that heritage, of course, I mean, it comes, unfortunately, the way that it did, which, of course, I mean, for us, we actually had to change. It was not el descubrimiento, it was not the discovery. It was el encuentro de América.
Oh, so you guys have changed it from the discovery
Yes,
to
because we didn't
the
discover
finding.
it.
Like
Yeah.
you came across it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it didn't make
wonderful.
sense. You're not discovering anything. It was there to begin with. And there were people.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, for obvious reasons, then the terminology, I mean, makes you think of a different way. Because now it's not descubrimiento, it's encuentro, it's the finding. So, I mean, we're very much in not trying to repair, because it's impossible to repair whatever damage that you do, especially when it goes back so many centuries back in time. But the collaboration is still very, very strong. As I said, our president is in Chile and Brazil. There's always connections, or cumbres iberoamericanas, as they call them, right? Ibero-American summits. And the king or somebody representing our country is going to be there. Because obviously those partnerships and those collaborations are still very valid. And we love it in the sense that you can travel across the ocean and continue using the same language, feeling the same way. So, I mean, I go to, I don't know, for example, I went to Bogota and I felt like I was in Madrid. Having a coffee outside, seeing people walking around, kids playing in the park, it's like, whoa, okay, this relates to me very much. So keeping that connection, I think it's essential in the sense that you can go from Colombia to Spain and feel at home. We can go from Spain to Colombia and feel at home. And the same applies to every Latin American country, including the Caribbean.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to hear. One thing that I've noticed in my travels, obviously, the Spanish that I grew up hearing in my household is very different from the Spanish I've encountered when I've spoken with Venezuelans, Colombians, Argentinians. So as, you know, someone who your field is linguistics, how is that for you? Are you able to pick up on the different dialects easily, or is there a challenge where you have to ask someone, what, you know, I'm not understanding. What does this mean?
No, I think that, I mean, they're intelligible to some extent. I mean, it depends on the community that you actually go to, because, for example, in Bolivia, where they speak Guarani, or they speak some Amerindian language, there is so much influence that maybe some terms you don't even know what it means, even though it sounds Spanish, but it's not, because I don't know what that word that you're using corresponds to in reality. But in the vast majority, I would say, I mean, every single different dialect of Spanish has enough similarities for you to actually be able to understand and process. And then, of course, comes the formación profesional, the professional deformation, in the sense that when you start doing the research, then you start picking on, okay, this is a trace that tells you, like, for example, why do Argentinians speak like they're singing? Well, that sounds like Italian. So it's the Italian influence that impose that type of intonation for anybody from Argentina talking Spanish. Or Venezuelans, they have like certain words that tell you, well, that has to be from Venezuela for sure.
Yeah, that's so interesting to me. I really love hearing the different dialects of Spanish and learning, you know, there are times obviously I get confused and I don't know what I'm hearing, or vice versa. I'll speak in Spanish and they'll tell me, you know, I don't know what that word is. It's always, I love learning about the impact of different cultures, whether it's indigenous or other European cultures,
That's right.
how they've helped the language to change and evolve.
That's right.
Or impacted the language, I should say, to change and evolve.
And sometimes it's even not involving, which is the nice part. So, for example, in Chile, they're using words that in Spanish they have evolved, but in their dialect they have been retained since the 1800s. So they're using
Really?
words like botar. Why do you use botar instead of tirar? We say tirar like to throw.
We say botar.
You say botar,
Yes.
but botar comes from the ships.
Really?
So you retain that word from the ship period because botari would be to throw something, but throw something out of the ship. So you're using that word from that period when the sailors, of course, they were throwing stuff, but they were throwing stuff out of the ship. That is the word that actually came and became coined as to throw in the Caribbean is going to be said botar and not tirar.
I had no idea. You just taught me something about my own. And
See, that's the beauty of these conversations.
yes.
Yeah.
So recently as well, you did the UCF Life event. And during the Life event, you spoke about, and please correct me because I don't remember the full name of the ship. Is it the
Juan Sebastián Elcano.
Yes. Can you tell us a bit about the Juan Sebastián Elcano? And you also said that there would be a special guest on board next year.
That's right. So the ship, I mean, it's a school that people training for the Navy, they have to, especially if they want to be high rank, they have to enroll in the program. So they leave Spain, and for like 3 months, they're traveling the world. They come to America, different places. I think this year they're going to be in New Orleans and California and Boston, if I'm not mistaken. The dates, I mean, I can provide you. I don't know them offhand, but I know that, I mean, the ports of entry in which they're going to dock, they're not the same every year. So they change them. Last year, for example, they were in Pensacola, which was amazing. I went to see it. And it's open to the public. I mean, the moment that it docks, they take like 2 hours to prepare everything, and then they open it to the public. It's free. It gets pretty busy, so I would say just be there early rather than late. And the beauty about it is that you can see that ship on the inside. I mean, it's amazing. It's huge. And you can talk to the crew. They are very friendly, bilingual, of course. So, and they give you like this booklet that has a lot of information about the ship, its history, and the fact that next year we're going to be honored to have the future queen. So Eleanor, Her Majesty, or Her Royal Highness, she's going to be on board because it's part of her training. So next year, I don't know what the ports of entry are going to be, but as soon as I find out, I'll make those available. But yeah, it's going to be amazing because he's going to be part of the cruise. He's going to be there. And of course, I mean, since it's an event that is going to be open to the public, I mean, I'm assuming that it's going to be a lot of formalities, but at some point, we should be able to meet the future Queen of Spain. So that's going to be something to look forward to.
Yes, that is so, that's something I'm looking forward to. I hope I'm able to experience that. And I know I'll be sharing that with my students as well. A lot of my students are fascinated with history and the fact that she will be crowned Queen of Spain and that the rules were changed for her to become queen.
That's the beauty of being a king, right?
My students have mentioned how they love that they're here. You know, they're seeing history live. So, yeah, that'll be a great experience. And that was everything I had for you. I believe, Diana, did you want to ask something else?
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on something that you mentioned from even with Spain's colonization history. You mentioned that it went from discovering to finding. When did that shift happen? And was it a cultural shift as well?
Yeah, it's a cultural shift and a slap in the hand. Because, I mean,
Right.
why using those terms when, I mean, when you look at them, you don't mean what you say.
Right.
So, I mean, it makes sense during the imperial times that, of course, you want to project this type of empire. It's the Spanish Empire and the Spanish Armada.
Right.
But, I mean, nowadays, that's not the perception and it's not the angle that you want to look at it when actually you are collaborating with all these countries. So, I mean, to me, it makes sense, especially as a linguist,
Right.
that they changed the name. Because discovery means something completely different from finding.
Right.
So, I mean, I applaud them that they actually came to this conclusion that it makes sense to use that term instead of the other. And why? Because, I mean, it's not just a matter of changing the label, but then we still feel the same way. No,
Right.
it's because, I mean, there are indigenous communities that they still kept, I don't know how many languages are spoken in Mexico. But
A
I
lot of
a lot of
dialects.
them.
Yes.
And I love the fact that, for example, the Consulate of Mexico here in Orlando, they have like 7 or 8 qualified translators for those 7 or 8 different languages that are spoken in Mexico, which are native languages. So, I
Right.
mean, to me, that's fascinating. So it's not just the Spanish. It has a lot more to it than just that language. So why not bringing them to the table and say descubrimiento?
Right. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank
That
you.
is beautiful.
One last question for you. In your role as the Honorary Consulate to the Kingdom of Spain in Orlando, you play a pivotal role in fostering cultural exchange. For those hesitant about delving into the Spanish language or uncertain about exploring the diverse facets of Spain, what guidance would you provide to encourage them?
Well, let me be cheeky now and quote Ambassador Max Bocus that we had here last week, but I cannot emphasize that enough. He couldn't emphasize that enough. Travel, see the world. I mean, come on, you're young. Now it's the time for you to actually experience everything, because it's not just the language. It's also the culture that is associated with it. And it's through language that you start to understand. It's like, I don't know, for example, I remember somebody told me that cenar, for them, it means something that takes place at 5. Okay, well, that may be for you. To me, cenar, which means to have dinner, is something that has to take place at 10 p.m. So, I mean, it's a lot of cultural elements that are involved in the language, and it's only through travel and experiencing that firsthand that maybe at the beginning it comes as a shock, but then once you start embracing those differences, it also helps you reflect on your own.
Right.
Like, my culture is what it is in comparison to others. And it's through that mirroring the culture of the other people that you're meeting, learning a language, traveling, that it helps you build yourself as a person, as an individual in this world. And especially being so cosmopolitan as we are and having access to international news, international media outlets, why not? I mean, if you have the means or you can find a grant, I mean, as I said, for example, this NACAL program in which you send the people that recently graduated who are U.S. citizens or from Canada, and then they go to Spain for a year, that's a beautiful opportunity. I mean, you're already granted a job. You're going to have a schedule. They're going to give you an orientation on where to find an apartment, who you're going to be living with, and everything else. I mean, it's not like traveling on your own, and then you don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. Am I going to be able to find a job? Do I need to apply for this or for that? I mean, you already go guided, and that helps a lot. Or study abroad programs. I mean, we have a beautiful UCF Global system here that centralizes all the study abroad programs. Just go there, check how many programs are available. Costa Rica, it doesn't have to be crossing the ocean. You can
Right.
just look
Yeah.
even in the same continent and experience it. Mexico, I mean, so close. Why not?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Rubiera, thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your journey and your insights with us. We really appreciate it.
It's been a true pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, this wraps up our discussion for today. I'm Karen Solla,
And I'm Diana Tristan.
and you've been listening to UCF's Office of Global Perspectives and International Initiatives podcast. To stay informed about our latest events, initiatives, future podcasts, and to learn about any guests that we have coming, please visit our website at ucfglobalperspectives.org. Thanks for tuning in.